Okay, I'm going to get started with our next two topics, which is what is enlightenment and the Four Noble Truths. So welcome back from the break, everyone. I'm just going to keep talking until everyone realizes that we're starting class. So this topic of what is enlightenment, you're going to need to understand this in order to be able to actually get to enlightenment. Without understanding what enlightenment is, you wouldn't be able to make your way to it. It's kind of like if you were approached by somebody and said, hey, would you like to go to Chiang Rai? Well, you'd be like, well, what is Chiang Rai? What is it like? You know, what is it going to, what am I going to do when I get there? You would like to know something about the city, Chiang Rai, before you actually decide whether or not you're even interested in going there. And then if you understand about what the city is, then you can more easily navigate your way to it. And then once you get there, you would know that you're actually at this city, right? If somebody was like, hey, it's the city in the north, it's about 3 hours north of Chiang Mai, you go through the mountains, and these are the kinds of things that you're going to experience when you get there. You'll know when you've arrived to Chiang Rai because you know a little bit about it. It's the same thing about the path to enlightenment. If you understand what enlightenment is, you'll be able to more readily navigate your way to it. And then once your mind is actually enlightened, you'll know that your mind is actually enlightened. So I'm going to spend some time here teaching you about what enlightenment is so that you can understand it. Normally in all the foundational classes, I spend a good hour and a half talking about this, helping students to understand it. In this particular retreat, I only allocated about 30 minutes to be able to explain this to you. So I'm going to kind of go through some of this stuff in a little bit more expeditious way than I normally do. But if at any point you would like to talk about any particular thing, feel free to ask questions, because ultimately what I'm going to be getting to before we finish up with this particular session is I'm going to share with you the very first teaching of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, where you can have that breakthrough to understanding the problem, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. That's the very first teaching of the Buddha to really be able to get on the path to enlightenment. But we're going to start with this topic of enlightenment and what is enlightenment. Okay? So the first thing to understand about understanding this topic is it's very challenging for the unenlightened mind to understand what enlightenment is. It's kind of like if I were to sit here and try to explain to you what chocolate ice cream tastes like, and you never have had chocolate ice cream before. I could sit here and explain it to you all day long, and you'll understand a little bit more about what chocolate ice cream tastes like at the end of our conversation, but you wouldn't fully understand it until you actually taste it. It's the same thing with enlightenment, is I can explain it to you, and you're going to know more about it when we're done than you do right now, but you're not going to fully understand what enlightenment is until you're starting to experience more and more of the qualities of enlightenment. So just understand that our conversation today, you're not going to understand 100% of what enlightenment is at the end of this, but you'll definitely know more about it than you do right now. Okay? So what enlightenment is it's a mental state that you attain in this life where you've eliminated discontent feelings, where you no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these discontent feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind. You won't even have the slightest displeasure in the mind. The mind will be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. This is a permanent mental state that you're experiencing at all times of your day. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience any of those discontent feelings. Your mind will be joyful, it'll be cheerful, it'll be uplifted, it'll be bright, it'll be steady, it'll be stable, it'll be calm. This is a permanent mental state that you're experiencing. The mind will be relaxed and calm, yet attentive and alert. Because sometimes when we think about relaxed and calm, we think like this, right? But that's not what the enlightened mind is. It's relaxed and calm, but it's attentive and alert. It's crisp, right? Your mind's uplifted and it's bright and it's cheerful. This is a mental state that you can attain in this life, and then you can enjoy that for the rest of your life. You can also attain this mental state at death. That would be the next best opportunity, because at least then you're not going to experience rebirth. But that means you've been annoyed and frustrated throughout your life. You never really got an opportunity to enjoy it. So what you would like to do is apply effort and energy towards learning and practicing and training your mind so that you can enjoy that mental state. So if you get to enlightenment at the age of 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever age it is, you'll enjoy the rest of that time in that enlightened mental state, where now the mind is peaceful and joyful. And there's other qualities and other benefits as well. You'll notice that your relationships are harmonious, and we're going to talk about more of the benefits here in a moment, but just more about what enlightenment is. That it's where you've actually freed the mind of craving, anger, and ignorance. We're going to be talking about that this evening after our excursion. I'm going to explain to you what craving, anger, and ignorance is. You've purified the mind of these pollutions of mind. That's how you've gotten to this mental state. So one of the ways that you can think about enlightenment is you can think about it as you need to attain enlightenment. That's one way that some people think about it. Another way you can think about it is that the mind is already enlightened. And by getting rid of these pollutions, now you can experience the qualities of the mental state of enlightenment. It's kind of like the sun is there, but the clouds are in front of it. And when you peel away the clouds, now the rays of the sun can shine through. And this is kind of more similar to what you're going to experience, because as you're making your way to enlightenment, you're going to see some of the qualities of enlightenment start shining through. Just like the rays of the sun are shining through the clouds, this is what you're going to experience. That it's not like one moment you're unenlightened, in the very next moment you're actually enlightened. It's not like a light switch. It's not instantaneous. The qualities of enlightenment gradually start shining through the mind more and more as you're getting closer and closer to it. So I think an actual better way to think about this is that, like that analogy of the sun, and then you've got the clouds in front of the sun, and as the clouds start peeling back, the rays of the sun start shining through, because that's what you experience with enlightenment, that the qualities of enlightenment start to shine through more and more as you're starting to peel away these pollutions of craving, anger, and ignorance from the mind. You need to realize non-self, which you guys will understand what that is here in a little bit more, and then dissolving of the ego, which again, you're going to understand what that is as you're making your journey to enlightenment. You'll be practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. You'll understand that this afternoon or this evening when we get together after the excursion. So while enlightenment is a mental state that you're experiencing, and that's a permanent mental state, the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind. It's a cleaning up of the mind and a ridding the mind of certain pollutions that are keeping it in the unenlightened state. There are certain causes and conditions that are keeping it in that mental state. Sometimes people describe enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss. I don't always describe it like that, because what people are oftentimes describing is when you get into the first jhana, you'll notice that there's oftentimes this bliss, this excitement that is there in that first jhana. And sometimes people experience the first jhana and they think that they're actually enlightened. You guys are going to learn about what the jhanas are. These are preliminary phases that your mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. And these are enhanced qualities of mind that you're experiencing. And getting into that first jhana is like night and day compared to what you were experiencing when you were off the path to enlightenment. So there's some people who make their way into that first jhana and they actually think that they're enlightened, and they will describe that experience that they're having as enlightenment. This is where sometimes you can hear some people say that enlightened beings still get frustrated or agitated or annoyed, or they still feel sad or something like this. And I can assure you that an enlightened being doesn't experience any of those feelings. But for some people who think they're enlightened, they might be explaining what they're experiencing as enlightenment, when in reality their mind actually isn't enlightened. So if someone's describing enlightenment as this ultimate bliss, what they're typically describing is the excitement of the first jhana. It's not enlightenment itself. There's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mental state. I just don't describe it as happiness, because what you're used to as happiness is conditional happiness, that if your bank account balance is here, you'll be happy, but then when it goes here, you'll be sad. Or if it's sunny outside, you'll be happy, but then when it rains, you'll be maybe frustrated or annoyed. Or if your mom and dad do this, you'll be happy, but if they do that, you'll be frustrated. So this is conditional happiness, which you're going to understand here in a moment when we talk about the Four Noble Truths. So that's why I don't describe it as happiness, because most people think of happiness as conditional happiness, that they need something to make them happy, where by the time you get to enlightenment, you're experiencing unconditional happiness, unconditional joy, where the mind is just always happy. It's always joyful. So the enlightened mind is beyond these conditional experiences. Conditional experiences means that if this thing is happening, I'll be so happy and so excited. But if that's not happening, I can't be happy and I can't be excited. So the mind goes up and down in the unenlightened state. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is just always uplifted. It's always joyful. It's always happy. It's unconditionally happy. So you'll understand this more here as we go. Okay, so this is what enlightenment is. The advantages of enlightenment is, yes, the mind's going to be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience any of these feelings of sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. The causes and conditions that produce these feelings have been eradicated from the mind through the purification of the mind. So that's why it's impossible for someone who's enlightened to actually experience any of these feelings. The mind will be focused and concentrated. You'll have clarity of mind and deep memory. And that's because the mind's now performing optimally. When the mind has these pollutions that you're going to hear about here in a moment, the 10 fetters, when the mind has these 10 fetters or these 10 pollutions, then it's not going to perform optimally. So that's why you might experience a muddled mind or lack of concentration or an inability to remember things because the mind is polluted with these pollutions. But when you purify the mind and you eradicate all of that from the mind, it's going to perform optimally, much like a musical instrument. That if a musical instrument was tuned too tight or it was tuned too loose, like a stringed instrument, it's not playing the way the instrument was intended to play. So now when you pluck the strings, the instrument doesn't play beautiful music. So your mind is the same way, that if it's not tuned well, then it's not going to perform optimally. But when you get rid of this pollution of the mind, it'll perform optimally, and you'll notice that the focus and concentration and clarity and deep memory will come into the mind because it's now performing the way it was intended to perform without those pollutions. You'll notice that you have deep wisdom about the path to enlightenment. You'll understand things that other people don't understand as you're getting to this enlightened mental state. You'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in all situations. I know that can be challenging right now. If you have these pollutions in the mind and the mind is unenlightened, there's probably certain situations where you're maybe impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. And that's because of the pollutions that are in the mind are hindering you from being able to do that. But when you eradicate these from the mind, no matter what other people are doing, you can still be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful in all situations. You'll notice that you're not causing harm to other beings because you've deeply understood whenever you cause harm, this harm comes back to you, and you've learned the natural law of karma so well that you're choosing wisely to not cause harm to other beings, and you will have the wisdom to be able to do that. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming, that they're at ease because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships any longer. You're not causing harm to others, so this harm isn't coming back to you. You'll get to the point where you're not even in a bad mood anymore. You just physically can't experience a bad mood. It's impossible for you to experience that. So these are some of the benefits, and there's others as well, but these are some of the benefits that you'll experience as part of getting to this enlightened mental state. The core central teachings that you need to start learning in order to be able to get to this mental state are here. The 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and the 5 precepts. I'm going to be teaching you all of these as part of this retreat. Then you're going to need to know the Brahma Viharas, which I teach in Volume 1, Chapter 14. We're not going to be teaching it to you here in this retreat, but in other courses, I'm going to teach it to you. I will be exposing you to it in this retreat, but I'm not really going to be teaching it. But there's other times that I teach this. The 10 fetters, you're going to be learning about these as part of this retreat, and there's other courses and retreats where I go into more details about these. There's the 7 factors of enlightenment, and then there's extensive meditation training. These are the core central teachings, but there's other teachings that you would need as well, not just these, but this is where someone's usually first starting. They start out with these particular teachings. And remember, you're learning, you're reflecting to independently verify, and you're practicing. You're not believing any of the stuff here, right? You're examining and investigating, you're reflecting to independently verify, and then you're practicing. And I'm going to show you how to do that here in a moment when we talk about the Four Noble Truths. So these are the 10 fetters. These are the lower fetters. These are the 10 individual pollutions in the mind. They're referred to as fetters because during ancient times, if you were a criminal and they were trying to keep you trapped and confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. This was a shackle and a chain and a ball, and they would keep you in this field. And this is how they kept prisoners confined to a certain area, where today we put people in prison cells or jail cells or something like that. So when the Buddha discovers these pollutions of the mind, he refers to them as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. And as long as these fetters are in the mind, you're going to keep experiencing the anger and the sadness and the frustration over and over and over again. So no matter what you're learning, whether it's the Eightfold Path, whether it's the 5 precepts, whether it's meditation training, or any of these other things, in one way or another, it's coming back to these 10 fetters and helping you to eradicate these from the mind. This is why you're experiencing more and more peace and more joy, is because you've purified the mind of these. But it's not like one day your mind's polluted and the next day it's not. It's a gradual declining of this pollution in the mind, and that's why the qualities of enlightenment gradually start shining through. So in this particular retreat, we're going to be focusing on the first 3 fetters because that's what you need to eliminate in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, is elimination of these first 3 fetters. So we're going to have a class on each individual one of these fetters where I'm going to explain to you what it is, what the symptoms are, because then you're going to be able to independently verify that your mind has these fetters. Then I'm going to explain to you how to eliminate it from the mind. Then I'm going to explain to you how to know that you've actually eliminated it from the mind. So this is the first 5 fetters. They're called the lower fetters. And then there's the higher fetters. And each of these you'll need to ultimately understand and be able to eradicate. But when you first get started, you're usually just starting with things like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and things like this, and you're just kind of getting your arms around that. And it's working to eradicate these. But then once you get to the jhanas, those enhanced qualities of mind, that's where your practice kind of pivots and you start focusing on the 10 fetters more closely. But when you first get started, it's meditation training, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, and a lot of these other things. So you really focus on that first. And then as you start to experience those enhanced qualities of mind, that's where you pivot and start focusing on these more directly. And we have one class in this retreat where I'm going to teach you about the jhanas so that you'll know that your mind is actually in the jhanas. So these are just kind of listing out for you what the fetters are, but it's not until later in your development that I really kind of hone in on this in detail, because that's when you really need it. But here I just kind of expose to you that this is kind of the underlying cesspool that you're cleaning up out of the mind, essentially, right? This is what you're getting rid of out of the mind. And you'll need to know what all of these are in order to be able to fully eradicate them. But you're working towards eliminating these even when you're learning meditation and the Eightfold Path and all these other things. Okay. As you're eliminating these fetters from the mind, you're moving through these 4 stages of enlightenment. They're referred to as stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. Nowadays, oftentimes we just refer to them as the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment, but this is the way they're referred to in the teachings of the Buddha. And he refers to them this way because it helps you to understand what you're accomplishing having gotten to that for those stages of enlightenment. So the first stage of enlightenment is referred to as a stream enterer, because once you get to that first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time, either in this life or some future life. So just like a log enters the stream and is going to eventually get to the ocean, once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. So that's why it's referred to as a stream enterer, because you will get to enlightenment from that point forward. Then there's something called a once returner. This is the 2nd stage of enlightenment. That's referred to this way because if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you're going to come back to the world one more time in the human realm and actually get to enlightenment in that existence. Some of you guys may have been a once returner in your past life, and now this is your opportunity to be able to get to enlightenment. Then there's what's called a non-returner. This is someone who is in the 3rd stage of enlightenment, and if they die in that stage of enlightenment, they're going to be reborn into the heavenly world, and then from there they're going to get to enlightenment and escape the whole cycle of rebirth. That's not the ultimate goal. The goal isn't to get to the heavenly world. That's a impermanent realm, that once you're in the heavenly realm, you still have to get to enlightenment. So an individual who's been in the human realm, who's gotten to that third stage of enlightenment, and if they die in that stage, they're going to be reborn there and actually get to enlightenment from the heavenly realm. Then there's something called an arahant. This is the way they refer to what we would probably refer to as an enlightened being. An arahant is someone who's completely purified their mind and they are enlightened. They're no longer experiencing any discontentedness. Then there's something called a Buddha. This isn't a stage of enlightenment. This is a unique type of individual. As we described a little bit yesterday, a Buddha is an arahant. They've eliminated all the 10 fetters from the mind, but they've done that in a way that they've done it without any teachers or without any guides. And this is one of the criteria of what makes them a Buddha. So I'll just kind of show you guys the fetters and how by eliminating these, you move through these different stages of enlightenment. So the first stage of enlightenment, you will have eliminated the first 3 fetters. There's other things that you need, like that's what I'm teaching this entire retreat about, is all the different teachings you need to be able to get to the point where you have eliminated these first 3 fetters. And then we're going to focus in on these first 3 fetters really closely in this retreat, because once you get into this first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness will be significantly reduced. Whatever you experience in terms of anger or frustration or sadness or anything like this, when you were off the path to enlightenment, by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness has significantly reduced by this point. And you will know that your mind is headed towards enlightenment. You don't just stumble your way into the first stage of enlightenment. And by the time you get there, you'll have everything you need to make your way to enlightenment. There's still more for you to learn. There's still more for you to grow and develop. But from that first stage, you'll be able to get to enlightenment. You'll have everything that you need. And if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the human world no more than 7 times. So by coming to that first stage of enlightenment, you're now functioning as a better and better human being. And that's why you will be reborn back into the human realm. You won't be reborn into the realm of hell or animal realm or afflicted spirits. And as I mentioned to you guys, nothing in the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief, including the 5 realms of existence and the cycle of rebirth. These are all things that you can independently verify. You might not know how to do that right now, or you might not have had that experience, but you can independently verify all these things that I'm sharing. And I share with students in volume 11, chapter 105, how to actually do that. There's 17 different ways that people can independently verify these things. But it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason, because it's not something someone usually approaches when they first get started. But because I'm talking about these stages of enlightenment and it's based on the 5 realms, a little bit of understanding of that in rebirth, you can understand that's why I'm teaching this. So you can just set aside the cycle of rebirth for now, because what's happened in the past, it's in the past. It doesn't matter right now. And what may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. It doesn't matter right now. But at some point, you're going to probably independently verify the cycle of rebirth in these 5 realms of existence. And now you'll have the information of understanding these 4 stages of enlightenment and how they factor into rebirth in the 5 realms. So this is the first stage of enlightenment, significantly reduced discontentedness, and this individual will make their way to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Then there's the second stage, which is, I call it a once returner. This person has already eliminated the first 3 fetters, and then they've thinned out number 4 and 5. They haven't eliminated 4 and 5, but they've thinned it out. So if you're noticing that you're maybe not as interested in sex anymore as you once were, this is because sensual desire is starting to be eliminated. You don't have to eliminate sex right now in order to be able to make progress on this path to enlightenment. But in order to get to enlightenment, an individual will ultimately eliminate sexual activity. And the reason why is because they will start seeing it as a conditional experience and a temporary pleasure, that essentially your mind becomes very happy, very excited. You have all this pleasure. But then when you're not getting sex, your mind's going to be agitated and frustrated and annoyed. If there was a way to get to enlightenment while still having sex, I would have figured that out, and I would have been very happy to report that to you, right? But there isn't a way to get to enlightenment while still having sex, right? There's a certain pleasure with sex, but there's something actually even more pleasurable than that, more enjoyable than that, which is enlightenment itself. And I know that's probably very challenging for you to think about right now, but there is something in the world that's more enjoyable than actually having sex. So what some people do that particularly are young, they will do all the other work on the path to enlightenment, making their way up to this second stage of enlightenment. And they might even hang out there for a good long while, maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, who knows? It's up to you. By the time you get to that second stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness has diminished even more than the first stage of enlightenment. You're going to be living a very peaceful life. And you can do all the other work on the path to enlightenment. But there's going to be times where you want to have sex and you can't. And you're going to be frustrated and you're going to be agitated and annoyed. And for those of you guys that have experienced that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you had a partner for a period of time. You guys were having lots of sex and wow, look at this, we're having lots of sex. But then you went for a period of time where you didn't have a partner and you're probably agitated and frustrated and annoyed when you weren't having sex. That's the reason why, as long as you have a craving for sex in your mind, you can't get to the permanent peace and the permanent joy. So you might get to the second stage of enlightenment, and it'll take you multiple years to get there, but you can kind of hang out there for a while, particularly if you're young or if you're interested in having a family or having children or something like this. That might be where you hang out for a while. But at some point, you're going to decide, been there, done that. I've done that sexual stuff enough. Let's move on, right? You're not going to be on your deathbed still having sex. There's very few people that are doing that. Even though we might think about that when we're in our teens and our early 20s, we're like, yeah, I'm going to be doing this until I die. The day I die, I'm going to be doing this, right? It's not actually true. There's very few people who are doing that until they die, right? So you're going to get to the point where it's like, yeah, I've been there, done that. How many more times can I do it that way, right? And you're going to be ready to move on because you're going to start seeing these qualities of enlightenment shining through more and more and more. Okay, so this is where that starts to really thin out. And for some people, even in their teens, in their 20s, they're just not really interested in sex that much. So some people are already kind of thinning that out even before they even get started on the path to enlightenment. By the time you get to the third stage of enlightenment, you've eliminated all the three or all the five lower fetters. They're completely eradicated from the mind. You're still experiencing discontentedness, but very rarely. It's very insignificant and very infrequent, maybe once every 2 or 3 months, even once every 6 months. And when it occurs, it's maybe like 30 seconds or a minute that you're experiencing just a little bit of annoyment. Other people around you probably don't even know that your mind's discontent. You're just kind of inwardly irritated or inwardly annoyed. And it's happening so infrequently and it's so insignificant when it occurs that sometimes people can become complacent here, that you're not really impacted by this discontentedness very much. So this is a point in time where you need to be really dedicated and diligent to your practice and continuing to do all the things that you've been doing that led to this particular point in time. If you die in this stage of enlightenment, you are reborn into the heavenly realm and you will attain enlightenment from there. But that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to get to this arahant, or the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind's completely purified of all these fetters, because from there, you're not experiencing any discontentedness whatsoever. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You'll see that your mind's completely peaceful, completely joyful. You haven't experienced any frustration, the slightest annoyment. You have nothing but wholesome relationships. You're experiencing nothing but wholesome results in your day-to-day life. Everything's peaceful for you. Life is at ease. On your way to enlightenment, you're going to meet with challenges and struggles, and there's going to be difficulties along the way. But by the time you get to this stage of enlightenment, life is so easy, so enjoyable. No matter what you're doing, you're enjoying it. Even if you're sitting at the Department of Motor Vehicles for 3 to 5 hours waiting for your driver's license, you would be enjoying aspects of that. You wouldn't be feeling miserable and horrible and impatient and all those kinds of things. So by the time you get here to the fourth stage of enlightenment, life is just so easy and straightforward. Your mind is performing optimally at this point. It's kind of like the world is your oyster. If you've always been interested to fly a helicopter, but you never went forward with that because you were kind of afraid and you didn't think that you could do it, at this point, your mind's performing optimally. You have focus and concentration and clarity. You have confidence in your ability to be able to go out into the world and accomplish the things that you need to accomplish. Maybe you go decide to fly that helicopter. Maybe you take training in doing that. Or maybe you'd like to be a master chef. Maybe you decide to go do that kind of thing, right? By this time, everything in your life is at ease by the time you get to that fourth stage. So let me pause here before I go further. I know I went through this pretty quickly. I'd just like to see if you guys have any questions on anything that I've been sharing so far. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'm wondering on which of the 4 stages you are, if you're willing to share.
Sure. So this is a common question that people ask. In one second. This is a common question that people ask about, whether their teacher is enlightened or things like this. But a person who's enlightened wouldn't actually share that they're enlightened. And the reason why is because in order to say that you're enlightened, this would be arrogance or boastfulness or pride. An enlightened being doesn't have any of that in their mind. And a person who's enlightened would be more interested in helping other people to get to that same mental state. And if somebody just said, yes, I'm enlightened, that doesn't give you any ability to figure out how to do it for yourself. So what I would rather do is help people understand what enlightenment is and how to actually get there. And then once you understand that and you can see your mind improving, then you'll know whether your teacher is enlightened or not, because that person wouldn't be able to guide you to enlightenment if they weren't enlightened themselves. So sometimes people will go around and they will say that they're enlightened, or they might say what stage of enlightenment they're in. The Buddha taught that this would be unwise to do because it doesn't provide you any benefit to be able to do that. So while I appreciate your question and your interest, I can share with you some things that you could ask a teacher to be able to help you to determine whether someone's enlightened or not. And if you'd like to ask me any of these questions, you're more than welcome to. Some good questions you could ask somebody is you could say, when is the last time you experienced anger? Right? And this might be a good way to ask them that question. Or you could say, is it possible to eliminate sadness or anger or frustration? Because if somebody says, no, it's not possible to eliminate that, then you know that they're still experiencing it. So therefore, they're not enlightened yet. Or you could ask them, like, what type of students do you accept? And what type of students do you reject? Because an enlightened teacher would accept all students. They wouldn't have any kind of criteria. You can ask questions like, how much does it cost for me to get to enlightenment, right? Because if they're like, oh, there's this 1-year package that's $10,000, but if you'd like to get there in 3 months, it's going to be $20,000, right? So you would know this person's not enlightened because they still have this longing, yearning for money, and they want this, right? So if you'd like to ask any of those questions, you're welcome to ask those, because sometimes students ask those kinds of things.
Yeah, in that case, I would like to know, when was the last time you were sad?
The last time I was sad. Yeah. So somebody asked me a similar question like this in a retreat about 3 years ago. And the way I replied to them is I said, it was so long ago, I don't remember when I was actually angry or sad. And in this retreat, this was in 2022, they said, well, what would your son say? Right? Because if you're going to be angry or frustrated, it's usually going to be around the people that are close to you. And my son happened to be at that retreat with me, and he had just walked into the room, and I said, I don't know, there he is, you can ask him, right? So he walked in, and there was all the students around, and they asked him, they said, when's the last time you saw your dad angry? And he sat there and he thought for a second, and basically what he came back with was 2017. He said, that's the last time you saw me angry. So that's what I think to be the last time that I was angry or sad or frustrated or any feelings like that. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Hello. There we go. I may be confusing Pali and Sanskrit or Buddhism and Hinduism, but what does the term bodhisattva refer to in this categorization here?
Sure. So one of the misunderstandings that people have is that the Buddha taught something called a bodhisattva, but you'll never find anywhere in his original teachings where he talks about this. This is typically in the Mahayana tradition, or sometimes in the Vajrayana tradition, they'll talk about this. What they think is that you should take a vow to not get to enlightenment, and then you should incur rebirth in order to come back and help other people get to enlightenment. But this isn't what the Buddha taught. He got to enlightenment, and then he helped people get to enlightenment, and then he died, and he never is going to come back ever again. And where you can see that this theory falls apart is not just from the Pali Canon, and you can see that it's not there anywhere, but how would anybody ever be able to help someone get to enlightenment if they haven't been able to do it themselves? It's kind of like, if you're interested in learning how to drive a car, would you go to someone who's never driven a car before? Or would you go see somebody who's maybe been driving for 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Maybe they've been an instructor for 3 to 5 years or 10 years. This is probably somebody you'd like to learn how to drive a car from. And also the way that this is thought about is it's kind of like a bodhisattva is holding the door and then letting everyone else through. But if everybody was a bodhisattva, how would anybody ever get to enlightenment? Because everyone's holding the door. Nobody would be able to walk through the door. And if this was the case, that everybody was a bodhisattva, then that means the world would be progressively becoming a better and better and better place, because we'd see people being reborn over and over and helping, and more people would be helping each other get to enlightenment. So there's no part of the teachings of the Buddha where he teaches that you should delay your enlightenment in order to help other people get to enlightenment. He teaches you to get to enlightenment yourself. In fact, you can see in his words where one time he says that he considers existence to be foul-smelling, much like urine or feces. He considers that any amount of existence to be foul-smelling, meaning that if you come into existence, there's going to be birth, sickness, aging, and death. There's going to be sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So as long as there's birth, there's going to be discontentedness, essentially. So what he is guiding you to do is to purify your mind so you don't experience the anger and the sadness and frustration. Then you won't experience rebirth and coming back into the world to experience the sorrow, grief, pain, and displeasure ever again. Any other questions? Yes, sir. You're welcome to take it back to your seat too, if you like.
So I was just wondering, if an arhat is already enlightened, why do they still meditate?
Sure. So getting to the point where you've eliminated the 10 fetters, the mind will no longer experience any discontentedness, and the mind is enlightened. But from that point forward, there's enhanced levels of concentration and focus and clarity that you can experience by continuing to meditate. So while we consider like, okay, this person is now enlightened, a person who's gotten to enlightenment, let's just say yesterday, is not as enlightened as somebody who's been enlightened for 20 years, for example. That person's mind is much more developed than even this person who just got to enlightenment yesterday, if there was a way to track it that way, right? Because this person who's been enlightened for 20 years, they're continuing to meditate, they're continuing to experience enhanced qualities of mind. But for all intents and purposes, they're both enlightened. Neither one of them are experiencing discontentedness any longer, but this other person's mind is more fully developed. So it's kind of like you would always take a shower, you always brush your teeth, you will never stop doing that, essentially. So it's the same kind of thing, that if there's been this practice of meditation that has led to the most important, most significant thing in your life that you've ever experienced, which is the elimination of discontentedness, you're not going to just stop doing that. You're going to continue to do it for the rest of your life, because you know of the wholesome things and the beneficial things that it's led to, and you'll just continue to do it because you're continuing to experience improved qualities of mind, even above and beyond where you experienced the elimination of discontentedness. You're still experiencing more and more concentration and clarity and focus. Okay, so let me see if we have anything online here. Hello to all you online. You're welcome to ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so let me share a little bit more with you guys. What a Buddha is, actually, let me see what time it is. You know what? I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to leave it right there. Usually I talk about what a Buddha is, but I talked about this yesterday just a little bit. The 3 criteria are the first 3 that are here, where a Buddha has gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They've dedicated the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and then countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime, and then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people get to enlightenment after their death. So this is what a Buddha is, but there's other criteria as well that I have here that you guys can see, but just in the interest of time, because we have things scheduled today, I'm going to move us forward to getting to the point where we talk about the Four Noble Truths, because this is what you need to be able to learn to really get on the path to enlightenment. It'll take me about 45 minutes to explain this to you guys. And this way I can take my time and make sure you thoroughly understand it. But if you ever are interested in learning more about what enlightenment is, you can just let me know. You can also watch the videos or listen to the podcast where I've spent a good hour and a half talking about this topic, making sure that students understand it. So I'm going to help you guys to understand the Four Noble Truths. This is the very beginning teaching of the Buddha, to be able to have this breakthrough, to be able to understand the problem in your mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is where you can understand why you're experiencing these feelings so that you can actually eliminate them. If you didn't understand what was causing them, you wouldn't actually be able to eliminate them. Okay? In order to understand the Four Noble Truths, you need to first understand the three universal truths. This is like building blocks to help you understand the Four Noble Truths. By the way, it sounds like we have a mic on somewhere. If you guys can just check your mics, it's a little bit of cracking somewhere. You guys can just click those off. So the three universal truths in the Four Noble Truths, we refer to them as truths because the Buddha knew that they were true. I know that they're true, and other people know that they're true too. But in order for you to benefit, you're going to need to know that they're true. So you're going to need to be able to learn, reflect, independently verify, and practice. And I'm going to show you guys how to actually accomplish this, starting with this first universal truth. The first universal truth of impermanence is explaining to you the way the world is. Remember, the Buddha is not explaining to you the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And what he's explaining is that everything around you is impermanent, is constantly changing. Anything that you can see, that you can hear, that you smell, that you can taste, anything that comes in contact with the body or anything that goes through the mind, this is all impermanent. It's constantly changing. So there's these conditioned objects that arise, they change, and then they fade away. That is impermanence. And you can look around the world and you can see this to be true through your own independent verification, that things are constantly changing. Then there's something called conditioned objects. That's conditioned objects. There's something called unconditioned objects. Unconditioned objects, they do not arise, they do not change, and they do not fade away. They are permanent. And that's why the enlightened mental state is permanent, because the mind is now unconditioned. One of the misunderstandings that people have is they think that the Buddha said everything is impermanent. What I say here is everything in the world is impermanent, meaning all the material objects and things that you see around you are impermanent. But that's not to say everything is impermanent, because there's things like the natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught. Those are actually unconditioned. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. That's why his teachings are timeless. What he taught 2,500 years ago is just as applicable then as it is now, because he's describing these natural laws and they haven't changed. Enlightenment, when you uncondition the mind, when you purify the mind, it's an unconditioned mind, so it's now a permanent mental state that you're experiencing at all times. But everything else that you see, hear, smell, taste, that comes in contact with the body or goes through the mind, these are all conditioned objects. They arise, they change, and they fade away. Okay? So this is the intellectual learning on this particular topic, but you don't believe it. Right? You need to independently verify it for yourself. So you can look around the world right now and you can reflect on this to determine if what I'm sharing with you is true. Because if you can find something that you can see, hear, smell, taste, that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind that are permanent, then you've disproven this. It's not a universal truth. So I suggest you start with something that you're familiar with, like this physical body. You're familiar with this. You can ask yourself, is this body permanent or is it impermanent? If it's permanent, that means it's never changed your entire life. If the body is impermanent, that means it's constantly changing. So what would you say? Is this body permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent, right? From the time of conception, when the egg and sperm came together, this body's been constantly changing. We get taller, we get fatter, we get shorter, we have teeth that grow in, they fall out, new teeth come in, we get cavities, our hair grows long, we cut it, it grows some more, we get moles and pimples and things like this. These are all changes to the physical body. Okay. What about your relationships? Are your relationships permanent, meaning you've had all the same people in your life throughout your entire life? Or are your relationships impermanent, meaning people are coming and going in and out of your life? Your relationships permanent or impermanent? They're impermanent, right? People are coming and going in and out of your life all the time. What about your bank account? Is your bank account permanent or impermanent? Very impermanent. I hear Alberto over there. Very impermanent, right? Goes up and down and up and down. Some people's goes up, up, up. Some people's goes down, 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 right? This is impermanence, right? What about the weather? Is the weather permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent. It's constantly changing, right? We could go on and on and on and on. And if this is what you need to do, you should do that. Go down the street, walk down the street. When you're walking down the street and you're looking at the sidewalk and you see a crack in the sidewalk, that's impermanence. Here in Thailand, the sidewalks go up and down, right? When you're walking along the street, some of them go up and down. That's impermanence. Some streets have sidewalks, some streets don't. You can look at the wood planks on the floor of the temple. Some of them are longer or shorter. The different texture and color is different, right? There's a certain number of people here in the class now that is different than that was here yesterday. And as we go through the week, the number of people are going to change up and down as we go throughout the week. This is all impermanence, right? There's constant change. Last night when we went to the night walking market, usually the streets are clear. So that's why when we went outside, I was just like, hey guys, let's go to the walking market. And I just kind of headed out to the walking market. And usually we would just make our way straight to the temple as a big group. But when we went out there, it was like, boom, there was all these people, right? And it was like, oh, this is very different than what's usually here. Usually we just make our way right to the place to eat. But we weren't able to do that yesterday. We kind of got broken up. There was a little bit of impermanence there on our way to the market, right? So this is just impermanence. And this is what the Buddha is teaching you, that things are constantly changing. This is a building block that you're going to need to understand to get to the Four Noble Truths. So that's why I'm teaching it to you here. But you don't believe it. You need to be able to see it for yourself. So if you need to walk around the world and be able to deeply see for yourself that everything around you is impermanent, that's what you're going to need to do, because this is a fundamental building block to help you understand the Four Noble Truths. The second universal truth is called discontentedness. If you've been in this area of the teachings of the Buddha, maybe studied other places, people might have referred to this as suffering. I'm going to explain to you what this universal truth is, and then I'm going to circle back and explain to you why I don't use the word suffering. In the original teachings of the Buddha, in the Pali Canon, the word dukkha is being used here. And this word dukkha translates as discontent, discontented, or discontentedness. What the Buddha is doing here is he's explaining to you the unenlightened mind and what you experience on a day-to-day basis. There's these conditioned feelings that one experiences. There's pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. The pleasant feelings are happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. The painful feelings are things like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. These are very painful to experience. Then there's neither painful nor pleasant. And I put boredom and loneliness in there, but some people say that's very painful for them. So you could put that in the painful category if you like. But shyness is a good example of this, that it's not painful, it's not pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. Or say you were on public transportation and somebody that you don't know comes and sits really close to you and your body is touching their body. You'd probably say, it's not painful, it's not pleasant. Maybe your mind's dissatisfied or uncomfortable in that situation. That's what this particular feeling is, the neither painful nor pleasant. So these are the three feelings that the Buddha is describing that the unenlightened mind experiences. Pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. And these are what's called conditioned feelings. They're based on some condition. So for example, if it's sunny outside, You might get happy or excited. That's a conditioned feeling. Based on the condition of the sun, you are now happy. But that happiness is impermanent because you based your feelings on some impermanent condition. When that changes, your mind's now going to end up in the painful feelings, the frustration, the agitation or annoyance. So as an unenlightened being, if you get so happy when it's sunny outside, and you're like, sweet, I'm going to go hiking. I'm going to invite my friends to go hiking. This is so much fun. I've been wanting to go to that trail for a long time. I'm going to go take a shower, and then I'm going to call my friends when I get out so we can go hiking. And now you go take a shower, and you come out, and it's raining. And now you're sad, you're frustrated, you're agitated or annoyed. That's the conditioned feeling. It's conditioned based on the sun. And now because the sun is impermanent, your happiness is impermanent too. This is why you haven't been able to get to permanent happiness, because the mind is forming its inner feelings on some condition. An enlightened being, when they see it's sunny outside, they were already happy before they ever saw it was sunny outside. And they're like, sweet, I'm going to go hiking today. I've been interested to go to that trail for a long time. I'm going to call my friends and let them know that we're going to go hiking. And if they'd like to come, they're more than welcome to come. So now you go and take a shower and you come out and you see it's raining. Well, guess I'm not going hiking. Maybe I'll stay home and read a book. Or maybe I'll go to the mall and watch a movie. Or maybe I'll invite my friends over and we can have dinner here at the house, right? You can maintain your joy because you didn't base your happiness on the sun. So when the sun's gone, you can maintain your happiness. You can maintain your joy, right? So in the unenlightened state, you're experiencing these conditioned feelings that your mind's going up and down, up and down. So the Buddha here is describing the unenlightened mind. And now I just shared with you the intellectual learning on this, but now you're not interested in believing it. You need to independently verify it. If you know that your mind is unenlightened, you ask yourself, does this accurately describe that? Do you experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant? Are there any feelings that you experience that don't fit into one of these three categories? And when we get to the question period, if you think that that's the case, just let me know and we can talk about it. Okay, so some people describe this as suffering. You might have seen this in books or other places that you've been studying. They'll use the word suffering. I don't use that word because, in my opinion, it describes the painful feelings really well. When you're angry or sad or frustrated or feeling guilt or shame or fear or stress or anxiety, you probably say you're suffering. But if your mom calls you up and says, hey, I heard you got a new condo. I'd like to come visit you this weekend, and you get really excited and really happy, would you say you're suffering? Or if your boss gives you a raise and you get so excited and happy about that raise, would you say you were suffering in that situation? Probably not. Right? Or say that person that comes and sits next to you in public transportation and your body's touching their body. Would you say you were suffering in that situation? I wouldn't say I was suffering in that situation, right? So if we continue to use the word suffering, it only is describing the painful feelings. This is 33% of what the Buddha is teaching on this important topic. So that means you're missing 66% of what he's talking about. And if you're missing 66% of the teacher's teachings, how could you ever actually get to the ultimate goal? So here, a better word to use would be discontent, discontented, and discontentedness. What you would need to be able to do is be able to see the pleasant feelings, those conditional pleasant feelings, as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones, right? Because when your mind is experiencing conditional happiness, that means the painful feelings are waiting right around the corner for you. If you get so happy about that brand new job that you just got, well, at some point you're not going to have that job anymore. And now you're going to be sad. You're going to be frustrated. Or if you get so happy because mom is coming to visit you because you just got that brand new condo, well, when she calls you up on Friday and says, hey, something came up, I can't come to see you, you're going to be sad. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be irritated and annoyed. But if mom calls you and says, hey, I'd like to come see you in your new condo, you're like, sweet, mom, that'll be a good time. We'll have a good time. I'll cook some dinner for you and we'll have a great time together. We'll have some great conversation. But now she calls you on Friday and says, hey, I can't come. I'm so sorry. Hey, no worries, mom. Whatever happens, happens. You can come another time. No worries. You can maintain your contentedness. But if you get those conditional pleasant feelings, meaning you can only be happy if mom comes to see you, that means you're going to be frustrated when she can't come. And because of impermanence, these things are going to happen. So you need to be able to see the conditioned pleasant feelings as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. Because if you allow your mind to get the conditional pleasant feelings, the painful ones are waiting for you right around the corner. So you would like to get to this unconditioned happiness where the mind is just always happy. So you need to be willing to let go of the temporary happiness in order to experience the permanent happiness or the permanent joy. And you'll understand this more when we get to the Four Noble Truths. So you can independently verify this. And if you'd like to start using this word discontent, discontented, or discontentedness, it more accurately describes the full range of emotions and feelings that an individual experiences in the unenlightened state. These conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. Then there's the universal truth of non-self. This is actually a solution to one of the problems that the Buddha discovered in the mind. If you think back to the 10 fetters that I just introduced you to just briefly, the very first fetter is called personal existence view. This is one of the problems in the unenlightened mind. This universal truth of non-self is the solution to that. So let me explain to you what personal existence view is first, then I'll explain to you what this universal truth of non-self is. So the personal existence view, what this is this is the pollution of mind, or the confusion, the misunderstanding that the mind has that this body or this mind is you and who you are. So the mind will cling to this physical body or this self-image or the self-identity that the mind is holding on to, and it'll think that this is you. So now, in a certain situation, say you're in a public setting and you spill spaghetti sauce or chocolate ice cream on your clothing, you might experience embarrassment because now your mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way because the mind's clinging to this self-image, wanting others to perceive this body in a certain way. And now when you spill spaghetti sauce or chocolate ice cream on your clothing, your mind isn't being perceived the way that the mind wants this body to be perceived, and now you're embarrassed. Or if you've ever seen a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or a gray hair, or you start losing your hair and you were shaken up by this, this is your personal existence view. The mind's clinging to the self-image, wanting to be perceived by others a certain way. And if the mind is getting that, you get happy. But if you're not getting what you want, the mind experiences the anger, sadness, or frustration, or embarrassment, or some other discontent feeling. If you've ever put on a bunch of clothes and you looked in the mirror and you're like, that's not the way I want to look today. And then you go over to put on some different clothes and you look in the mirror and you're like, no, that's not the way I want to look today. And you keep switching your clothes on and off. This is your personal existence view. The mind doesn't feel comfortable going out into the world until this body looks a certain way. If you were like me when I was a teenager, I had the gel and the mousse, and I was in the mirror, looking at every little hair, trying to get every little hair in exactly the right spot. And I couldn't go to school until I had every little hair in exactly the right spot. So much so that I would sometimes miss the bus on the way to school because I was spending so much time fixing the hair. Right? This is personal existence view. The mind is clinging to this self-image, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And now, if somebody says, oh, you look so handsome in that shirt, or you look so beautiful in those clothes, that shirt really brings out the colors of your eyes. This is agreeable speech that you hear about this self-image, and you feel pleasant feelings. You feel so great because they're talking about me, right? But now, because of impermanence, it's only a matter of time before somebody says something negative and degrading and disparaging about this physical body. Why are you wearing those white clothes? You look like a marshmallow man. What are you doing? Like if you fall in the mud, you're going to have such a hard time cleaning those clothes. You're so stupid for wearing those. Well, if you identify as being who you are, you're going to feel frustrated and annoyed and agitated in that situation, right? You might be ready to fight this person. That's because your mind is clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. This is the personal existence view. Then there's a self-identity that the mind can cling to. This is based on your culture, your ethnicity, maybe your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. Your mind can cling to this I am. like I am American, or I am German, or I am Lithuanian, or I am Polish, or I am a Brit, or I am an Aussie, or I am Ecuadorian, right? Or I am Spanish. Any of this I am. I am a police officer. I am a Buddhist teacher. I am this. I am that. If you cling to any of these kinds of things, well, when somebody says something agreeable, you'll get those pleasant feelings. All Chinese people are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. You might feel so great. But it's only a matter of time before somebody says something degrading and disparaging about the nationality that you have in your mind that you might be clinging to. So if somebody says something negative and degrading about your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, or your job or occupation or something like this, you'll feel less of a person. You'll feel unwhole. If you've ever been in a relationship before with a boyfriend or girlfriend and you identified with I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend, right? Now when you're in the relationship, you feel great. But then when you in that relationship and you are now single, you might be thinking, I am not single. Now I want to hurry up and get right back into this other relationship. If you've ever felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship, your mind's trying to readopt this identity of I am a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend, because you didn't feel comfortable with I am single. The mind didn't feel comfortable with that. It didn't identify that way. And the mind thought the way to solve this problem is to hurry up and get right back into another relationship and reassume that identity. Or if you've ever had a job or occupation, like I am a police officer, and now maybe 10 or 15 years you're working in that job, you're thinking I am a police officer, but now maybe you get injured or you get fired or you retire and then you're not doing that anymore. Now you're maybe a food server or a taxi driver. The mind's going to feel uncomfortable because it's identifying with I am a police officer, but yet you're not doing that any longer. So now the mind can really struggle during that period of time. This is because of its personal existence view. It's clinging to this self-image. It's clinging to this self-identity, thinking that this is who you are as a person. And now when you hear agreeable things about that, you'll feel pleasant feelings. When you hear disagreeable things, you'll experience painful feelings. And you can't control what other people do and what other people say. So if I'm at a restaurant and 2 tables over, they're saying all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. I've never heard this before, but potentially this might happen, right? This could potentially happen, right? You might get like, wow, you feel so great, right? But now 2 tables over, somebody else might say something that's negative and degrading and disparaging, right? And now your mind's discontent. This is because of personal existence view. Okay, so you can eradicate all of this from the mind, okay, by realizing non-self. You need to realize that this body is not you. It's not who you are. This mind is not you. It's not who you are. There is a body, there is a mind, and it's come together for this existence, but you don't have to adopt this as being who you are as a person. So I know that this body was born on a land that is oftentimes referred to as America, but the mind doesn't have to adopt that identity of who I am as a person, right? I realize that I'm performing the role of a Buddhist teacher, but I don't have to adopt the identity of I am a Buddhist teacher. I can just understand I'm performing that role, but that's not who I am as a person, because this isn't permanent. At some point, this being's going to die, and it's no longer going to be performing this role. Your mind can grasp and cling onto any number of things as part of your identity or your image. I had a student one time that contacted me for personal guidance, and they said, hey, it's after COVID. I've been going around to all these restaurants, and people are accepting cashless payments, and they want me to use my credit card and all these kinds of things. And I go into the coffee shop and I spend 30 seconds ordering my cup of coffee, and they swing the screen around and it says tip, 20%, 25%, 28%. And I feel so conflicted because I am a great tipper, but I don't tip when I go to these places because it's just a 30-second transaction. Why should I give them a tip? They're just taking my order. They're just doing their job. But I feel so conflicted in this situation. What should I do? And I said, you need to eliminate the I am a great tipper, right? That was the identity that this person was clinging to. And in most cases, this person tips and they give tips out. But in this situation, they weren't, and their identity wasn't intact. So they felt uncomfortable in this situation. So when you realize non-self, you'll get to the point where you're no longer confused about this body or this mind as being who you are. You'll understand that there is a body, there is a mind, but this isn't who you are. So there's ways to independently verify that there is no self. Sometimes when I describe this to people, they don't understand it right away. And if that's the case, it's okay. We actually have an entire class in this retreat where we're going to be spending time on this for about an hour, hour and a half. We're going to be talking about this. But let me help you see how you can independently verify this right now. Okay, so ask yourself, think about how you thought about your character and your personality when you were a child, teenage years, early adulthood, and then now. Think about how you viewed yourself. Was it exactly the same during these 4 phases of your life when you were a child, teenager, early adulthood, and now? Or has this been constantly changing, the way you viewed yourself? Right? It's probably been constantly changing. You haven't looked at yourself in the same way through all these 4 stages. And that's where you can see that there is no permanent self. There is no self. Here's another way. If your arm was amputated and you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? If you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? I see some people shaking their head no. Are you less of a person? Shaking your head no, right? So here you can understand intellectually, you know that this body isn't you. But this is where the confusion comes in, where the misunderstanding comes in. Because in the heat of the moment, when somebody says something about this body, you'll get angry, you'll get frustrated, right? Because if this body was you, when I asked you if your arm was amputated and you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? If this body was truly you, and that's what you truly knew to be the truth, you would say, yes, I am less of a person because I only have one hand and one arm now. Because this body is me, I have less body, so therefore I am less of a person. But when I ask that question, pretty much everybody always says, no, I'm not less of a person if my arm is amputated. So that shows you on an intellectual level, you understand that this body is not you. But the mind's lack of wisdom on this universal truth, it gets confused. It has this misunderstanding that when somebody says something about this body, you get irritated or frustrated or agitated if they say something degrading or disparaging about this body. That's the confusion that the mind has. Now here's a third way that you can independently verify that there is no self. Point to yourself. Where are you? Pointing there. Some people pointing here. Yeah, that's common. Yeah, sometimes people point here, right? So if you're pointing here, you need to look at what you're pointing to. You're pointing to a shirt. Is that you? Is that who you are? The shirt that you're wearing? Like if I took off my shirt and I held it up, is that me? Is that who I am? Am I this shirt? Nobody's answering. You're shaking your head no? Okay, so let's throw away the shirt. That's not me. I can tell you that this shirt is not me, right? Because I'm wearing potentially, like you guys, I would wear different shirts. I wear the same shirt all the time, a different version of the same shirt, but it's a different shirt every time, right? So that shirt isn't me. So we can throw it away, right? So where are you? Someone might point again. You got to see what you're pointing at. You're pointing at skin. So ask yourself, is that who you are? That skin that you've got? Is that you? So if I took off the skin and I held it up and we pointed to it, is that me? Right? Is that who I am? Is that who you are? That skin? That's not you, right? So let's throw that away. Where are you? So I might point again. Well, you've got ribs, you've got muscle tissue, you've got bones and fluids and organs. None of that stuff is you. These are just bits and pieces and parts that people assume the identity of this is who you are. Because the challenge is that we've all been taught throughout our life that these things are us. In fact, we have national anthems, we have flags, we have sports teams, we have all these different things that reinforce that this is who we are. And we're out there cheering for our sports teams as this is who we are, right? You were even given a label at birth. I don't know about you, but my label was David, right? We've all been given labels at birth, and now we have this personality and this character and this image that goes around all of these things. So our mind has been conditioned to believe that this body or this mind is who you are. But you can get to the point where you realize non-self and you strip all that away. And that's going to help you to get to more peace and more joy. Because when somebody says something positive about this body, you'll just be like, oh, thank you so much for your compliment. But your mind can stay steady and calm and stable. You don't get those conditioned pleasant feelings. But now when somebody says something degrading and disparaging about this physical body, you'll probably just keep on walking. You won't even pay it any attention. You won't be upset. You won't be angry. You won't be frustrated. But if you allow your mind to get the pleasant feelings when they say something positive about this body, when somebody says something negative or degrading, you're going to experience the painful feelings. So you need to be able to stay steady and calm and stable, but you can't do that as long as you identify with this body or this mind as who you are. So there is a body, there is a mind, they've come together for this existence, and we refer to this as a person or a human being, but you need to be able to get to the point where you don't see it as who you are as a person. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have, if any, on these three universal truths. Do you guys have any questions you'd like to ask? Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask a question for clarification about the condition.
I'm not sure if your mic's on or not. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay.
So when you're in an unenlightened state, you're still able to, experience pleasant feelings, but they're conditioned. And when you're in an enlightened state, you can experience those feelings as well, but they're unconditioned. Is that right? So it doesn't mean that you're not feeling any feelings at all. They're just unconditioned.
Close. When you're in the unenlightened state, you are experiencing conditioned feelings, that your mind is happy and excited, but then you're sad and frustrated and irritated and annoyed. That's what an unenlightened being experiences, conditioned feelings. By the time you get to the enlightened mental state, you're experiencing what I refer to as unconditioned mental qualities. And the Buddha talks about this too. They're unconditioned mental qualities where the mind is just always joyful. It's always happy, but it's not based on any condition. That you don't need anything to make you happy. That's a conditioned feeling. Your mind is just always happy. So if you have a life partner, you are happy when you're together with them, but you're not happy because you're with them. You're just happy. You're just enjoying that time together. But now when you guys are apart, maybe they go on a business trip for 2 or 3 weeks or a month or two, you're still happy. You have a wonderful life. You just enjoy what you're doing. Oh, they're coming back now? Okay, well, let's enjoy that too, right? So this is unconditioned mental qualities where the mind is just always happy. And we don't refer to it as feelings because a feeling arises, it changes, and it fades away, where these qualities are just persistent and consistent in the mind all the time. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Say that some religions might say that
impermanence.
So some religions might say that there's a more permanent.
Could be. Usually the if the batteries are charged, they usually work just fine.
Some religions might say that there's a more permanent self known as the observer or witness. So this would be able to view the body, the thoughts on a more impersonal level. But from my understanding, Buddhism also says that this is impermanent. So can you explain why?
Yeah, so what some people are referring to as the observer, the Buddha refers to as the person. So he talks about the body and the mind and the combination of these two things being the person. So it's the person that's training the mind. The mind is like a third entity. And this actually helps you because sometimes you can talk to the mind. You're like, I know you want those new shoes, but you're not going to get them because you have 30 pairs of shoes at home. I'm not going to get that for you, right? So you can kind of like treat the mind almost like a third entity, and it's helpful to train it in that way. So what people are referring to as an observer, the Buddha refers to as a person, but the word observer is fine too. You could use that, but there is no self there. People will come to places like Thailand in search of themselves, wanting to find themselves. They don't know who they are. They're looking for this true self. But you can never find it because it doesn't actually exist. Even if people think that it does exist, it doesn't. So they might come to a place like Thailand and they might find new hobby, new activities, new jobs, new friends, things like this. And they might go home and they're like, wow, I found myself. Yeah, I know who I am now. But then 5 years later, they're back in the same problem again because all that stuff has changed. So what the Buddha is teaching you here is to not cling to the body and don't cling to the mind thinking that this is who you are, because all this stuff is going to change. As soon as you allow yourself to cling to I am a police officer, then that means you can only be happy when you're performing that role. Or if you cling to I am a boyfriend, or I'm a girlfriend, or I'm a husband, I'm a wife, you can only be happy when you have that intact. So even though other people say that there is a self or something like this, you need to be able to penetrate into it to be able to see the truth that none of these things define who you are. And this is where, like, if you get a little extra weight or a lot of extra weight, you can be completely comfortable with that and just understand that this is impermanent. And maybe you still need to make some decisions to exercise or eat better and stuff like that, but you won't feel diminished as a person. You won't feel degraded and diminished as a person because you don't identify with any of this as being who you are. You have a follow-up? Mm-hmm.
Hello. So do enlightened people, do they experience motivation to achieve things, or are they just content?
So an individual who's enlightened, they'll be practicing what's called the enlightenment factor of energy, which the enlightenment factor of energy is where you have a willingness to do something, you take initiative, and you have enthusiasm, motivation, and ambition. You have vigor. Because when you're letting go of craving, desire, attachment, the mind can oftentimes swing to the other side where the mind feels dull and lethargic, but neither one of these two are actually where the mind is enlightened. The mind is enlightened when it comes to the middle. And what the unenlightened mind is used to is chasing after things through craving, desire, attachment, which I'm about to explain to you now. And when you start letting that go, the mind oftentimes swings to the other side. So you need to arise this enlightenment factor of energy where you have motivation and encouragement and enthusiasm to work towards a goal, objective, or interest, but you're not forming your inner feelings on whether you accomplish that thing or not. And this is what the mind needs to learn how to do, because it doesn't know how to do that. It needs to cultivate the wisdom of how to do that, because we're typically motivated in the unenlightened state by our cravings, desires, attachments. So when you start eliminating that from the mind, you need to learn how to make wise decisions towards a goal, objective, or interest, but without forming your inner feelings based on it.
To me exists somewhere like behind my eyes. And the other thing that distinguishes me is distinguishing from others. I was just wondering how you might respond to that.
So what the mind's going to do until it realizes non-self is it's going to keep grasping for something to try to hold on to it and say, this is me, this is who I am. But what you'll be able to see eventually is that none of that stuff defines this being, that this being is constantly changing. It's a constant work in progress. And as soon as you allow it to grab onto something and you think that this is you, you'll feel great as long as that's intact. But once it changes, you're going to feel the painful feelings, the frustration. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is how to eradicate that from the mind so that you just understand that, yeah, there's a being here that is in existence, but you don't have to cling to any of this as who you are. I'll give you another example. This is a good one that a lot of people can relate to. It's not only the physical body in the mind that the mind can grab onto and thinking that this is you, but even like your choices and decisions. I know some of us have used drugs and alcohol in the past, and maybe you've been taught that I am an alcoholic or I am an addict. right? And this is a thinking that the mind adopts. And I understand why people do this, because it helps you to be able to know that it's unwise to ever go back to substances again. And that's why they typically teach this. But if you allow your mind to adopt an identity based on decisions that you've made in the past, now you can feel like less of a person, and you can feel diminished as a person, because now you walk around with this label of I am an addict or I am an alcoholic. I used to use drugs and alcohol in the past. I don't anymore, right? But I don't have to walk around with the label in my mind of I am an alcoholic or I am an addict. I know wisely that I never am going to touch that stuff again because I think of it as poison, but I don't have to adopt this identity and carry around this burden of I am an alcoholic or I am an addict, right? So you can free yourself of that and realize that, sure, I used to make decisions in the past unwisely to use substances, but I'm not making those decisions anymore. And I haven't made those decisions for a very long time, but I don't have to identify as that's who I am as a person. So it comes down to the same thing with the body and the mind, or the self-image and the self-identity. You don't need to adopt any of this as who you are. So this is an example that people can sometimes see it more clearly. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to continue on forward here, helping you with one more building block before I share with you the Four Noble Truths. This is craving, desire, attachment. This is something that you need to know in order to understand the Four Noble Truths. We define this in a very specific way to help you understand what's going on in the unenlightened mind. What craving, desire, attachment, wants, expectation, longing, yearning, this is the mind longing, yearning for something, to form its inner feelings. It's the mind pulling in the direction of the objects of its affection. This is the mind chasing after the next new shiny object, waiting around the corner, thinking that that shiny object is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases it and chases it and chases it and chases it. And if the mind gets what it wants, it experiences certain feelings, right? And if it doesn't get what it wants, it experiences certain feelings. You'll hear about this in the Four Noble Truths. But this craving, desire, attachment, it's the longing, it's the yearning. It's thinking something external is going to provide lasting satisfaction. So it chases after it. If you've ever been in the mall and you saw that brand new pair of shoes and you were like, oh yeah, brand new pair of shoes. Oh, I can't wait to get those on my feet. It's going to look so good. Oh, I can't wait to get those. That's the craving, desire, attachment. Not the shoes, not the object, but the longing, yearning within the mind. Or maybe it was a new phone or a new video game or something like this the mind was longing, yearning for. Or maybe it was like, I know what I need. I need a new boyfriend or girlfriend. That's going to make everything better. So the mind chases after that for a while. Or the mind might say, oh, I know what I need. More money. That's what's going to solve everything. Let me chase that for a while. Right? So this is internally within the mind. It's not the object itself. It's the way the mind is longing, yearning for it. So do you guys know what I'm talking about here? Have you experienced this? Some of you guys are shaking your head, yeah? Okay. So you'll be able to be more and more aware of this, where the mind's longing, yearning, and it's forming its inner feelings based on these. Okay, so now we can move into the Four Noble Truths. This is going to explain the problem, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. So the problem is in the first noble truth. The problem is the discontentedness. Everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness, those conditioned feelings. That's the problem. The mind gets so happy and so excited, it goes up into this excited state, but then it feels this sadness, this painful feelings, and then it has these neither painful nor pleasant feelings. So the problem is that the mind's going up and down, up and down, up and down. Sure, you have periods of calm and peace here and there, but it's only a matter of time before you get frustrated or annoyed about something. It's only a matter of time, right? So that's the problem that the Buddha discovered. Then the second noble truth is explaining that discontentedness is caused by our own cravings, desires, attachments, because the mind wants everything to be permanent when everything in the world is impermanent. I'm going to say that a few times, and I'm going to give you some examples. So those discontent feelings, the pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant, is caused by the craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. The mind wants things to be permanent, yet everything in the world around you is impermanent. Okay. So think back to that boyfriend or girlfriend when you guys first got together. You were probably so happy. You're so excited, right? They were showing you affection. They were calling you and checking in on you. You're going to the movies. You're going to the park, having great conversations, right? You might have been having intimate contact together. Oh, such pleasant feelings. So great, right? So happy, so excited. But now as time went on, there was problems in the relationship. Maybe you had certain expectations of them. Maybe they had certain expectations of you. And they couldn't meet your expectations permanently. You wanted them to be a certain way, and they couldn't meet those permanently. So now you guys broke up. And now when you guys broke up, you might have been really angry. You might have been frustrated. You might have been lonely. You might have been bored. You might have been missing this person. It wasn't the love that was causing that. It wasn't because you cared about this person. What was causing the mind to be angry and sad and frustrated there is the mind was craving permanence. It wanted this relationship to be permanent. And now the mind was holding on, craving for it to be permanent. When in reality, this relationship was always impermanent. Even if you guys were together for the rest of your life, more likely than not, one of you would have died first. And now your mind was experiencing that impermanence. So a way to say that the mind craves permanence is to say that the mind does not like impermanence. It doesn't like change. Think about any time that you've been experiencing significant change in your life. Your mind has having certain difficulties during that time, right? So maybe you change jobs or you change living locations or something like this. Your mind was having difficulties during that time. So even say like when grandma and grandpa die, or mom and dad, or brothers and sisters, if you were grieving and you felt sorrow during that time, you're not a bad person. You haven't done anything wrong, but it wasn't your love that was causing that sorrow and the grief. It was your mind craving permanence, wanting grandma and grandpa to be permanent. Where if the mind gets what it wants, it gets happy, it gets excited, it gets elated. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings like anger, sadness, and frustration. You might even see this at a wedding. If you see people at a wedding grieving, this is the craving for permanence. That you see brother and sister going off in the world with another person, and it's like, that's my brother, that's my sister. Why are they taking them away from me? Right? This is mom and dad, or other people could be crying at a wedding. This is because the mind's craving permanence. Or if you can think back to getting dropped off at university, or when you were a child, getting dropped off at like kindergarten or something like this, or preschool, children cry and cry and cry when they get dropped off at school because they're craving permanence. They thought mom and dad were permanent, and here they go off into the world by themselves. Right? This is the mind craving permanence. Or think back to a brand new car that you might have gotten. You worked really hard. You saved up money for this brand new car. You purchased it. You drove off the parking lot of the dealership. You parked it at a store. You went inside and you came out and there was a scratch on the car. Oh, you might have been really frustrated, right? Well, it's not the scratch that's causing the frustration. And it's not the person who scratched your car. That's not what's causing the frustration. The mind is craving permanence. It's wanting this car to look permanently beautiful. And while it'd be wonderful if nobody ever scratched our car, that's not the world that we live in. We live in an impermanent world. And when we walk through the parking lot of where cars are, we aspire not to scratch anybody's car. But impermanence is going to happen. Somebody's going to be pushing a cart. It's going to run into our car and it's going to get scratched, right? It would be wonderful if nobody ever scratched our car. So we're not talking about what's wise or unwise here, because that's why we walk through a parking lot and we try not to scratch people's car. But it's going to happen. And if the car doesn't get scratched, the paint's going to fade, the upholstery is going to get ripped and torn, the tires are going to need to be changed. This car is impermanent. But if you crave for it to be permanent, when you're confronted with impermanence, you're going to have a difficult time in that situation. So the mind is craving permanence. This is the cause of the problem, that the craving, the desire, the attachment, the longing, the yearning, wanting things to be permanent. But remember, you're not interested in believing me about anything. So now take some time to reflect on this so that you can independently verify it. Because I just shared with you the intellectual learning. Think about a time when you've recently been angry or frustrated or sad or irritated or annoyed. It might have been this morning. It might have been yesterday. It might have been last week, right? Think about that situation. Look at it with these new eyes. There was something that your mind was craving, that you were longing, that you were yearning for. And at that time, you might have been looking for someone else to blame, because that's what the unenlightened mind typically does, is it will try to blame someone else for the feelings that you're experiencing. But now look at it with these fresh eyes. There was something that you wanted. And if you would have got what you wanted, you would have been happy or excited. But because you didn't get what you wanted, you were angry or frustrated or sad, right? And if you have trouble figuring that out, let me know. Because students sometimes share things with me and they let me know. Like I had this one student one time, they were saying, hey, I went to work the other day and my house looked absolutely beautiful. I came home from work and my wife had this craft project all over the house and I got frustrated. How did my mind cause these discontent feelings? Didn't she cause me to be angry because she's the one who messed up the house? I was like, no, she didn't. It was your mind craving permanence. You had an expectation of what this house was supposed to look like. And when you went to work, you were craving that permanence. And then when you came home, the house looked different than what it did when you left. And now when you experience that impermanence, your mind didn't like that. So another way to say that the mind craves permanence is to say that it does not like impermanence. Right? Whenever it's experiencing that change, it doesn't like it. It's craving permanence. Okay? So what the mind typically does when it's experiencing these painful feelings is it falsely attributes these feelings to something external. And you will usually push people away out of your life. This is called aversion. The mind thinks it's going to solve its problem by pushing these people away. Or it'll become bitter and harsh and hostile towards people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. This is where you might be having animosity or resentment or hostility towards others, and it damages your relationships. Or you might put your expectations on people and try to control them. The mind's trying to get its cravings fulfilled. The mind wants things to be a certain way. And it wants that to be permanent. And it thinks if I push this person out of my life, I'll get what I want. Or if I'm bitter, harsh, and hostile, I'll scare this person and fear them into doing things my way. Or if I put my expectations on this person and try to control them, then they will do things my way and I get what I want. It gets those cravings fulfilled. But this just keeps you stuck in the same cycle of experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again. So as long as there's cravings, desires, attachments in the mind, you're going to be experiencing these discontent feelings. So the cause of discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment. But then the third noble truth is explaining the elimination of this, the solution, that if you eliminate the craving, desires, attachments, then you will eliminate your discontentedness. So if you eliminate that longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of your affection, trying to get people to do things your way and craving that permanence, then you can eliminate your discontentedness because you can understand impermanence, right? So if you can eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments in the mind, that's what will produce the peace and the joy, the enlightened mental state. So the third noble truth is explaining the solution to this is to eliminate discontentedness by eliminating the cravings, desires, attachments. Then the fourth noble truth is explaining the complete solution here, that the solution to this is to practice the Eightfold Path. By learning and practicing the Eightfold Path, that's what's going to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. It's a complete, perfect plan with 8 individual factors that is going to teach you how to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. And that's what I'm going to teach tomorrow morning. This Eightfold Path has 8 individual factors. This is the way that I think about this is if you think about like a speaker system and you think about 8 dials, that you would like to tweak these 8 dials and get a better and better quality sound coming out of the speakers. This is what you're doing, is you're tweaking these 8 dials in order to get a better and better quality performing mind. And this starts with right view. That's what we've been talking about this morning, is with the Four Noble Truths. This is right view. Right view is to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these discontent feelings. It's craving, desire, attachment. Wrong view would be to blame other people for the feelings that you're experiencing. And unfortunately, this is what the unenlightened mind does, is it firmly believes that other people are causing you to be angry. I'm sure you've been in arguments before where you've been adamantly trying to convince somebody that what they are doing is causing you to be angry and they have to stop doing what they're doing, or else you're going to continue to get angry, right? This is because of the mind's wrong view. But if you have right view, then you understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. So the way that you practice right view is that now and forever, I encourage you that whenever you're discontent, is to sit down and look inward and figure out, what are your cravings? What are your desires? What is your mind longing, yearning for? What is the craving for permanence that the mind wants here? And if you can uncover that and eliminate it, that's what's going to bring you your contentedness and your joy. And you can see that in that relationship with that boyfriend or girlfriend, that when you guys first broke up, you were angry, you were frustrated, you felt lonely and bored, you were missing this person. But at some point, your mind let go. And when you let go, that's when you got your peace and your joy. You were like, you know what? If he wants to be with somebody else, so be it. And you let him go. And your mind regained its peacefulness. Or if she wants to move to another part of the world, so be it. And you let her go. And that's where your mind regained its peace and its joy, because you let go. But the mind doesn't know how to do that. In the unenlightened state, it holds on and holds on and holds on. That's what the craving and the clinging is, that it wants things to be permanent. So to establish right view, you need to be able to see the truth that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And if you're having trouble to see that, let me know. So let me know what questions you guys have here, because what we're going to be doing throughout the rest of the retreat is we're going to be building on this, because this is a foundation. And then we're going to be building on this to be able to see all the other factors that you need to learn and practice to be able to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. But the Buddha wisely starts right here at the beginning to help you understand what's causing these feelings. Because how could you ever eliminate your anger and your sadness and frustration and all these others if you didn't understand what was causing it? So that's why he starts you with right view, so you can understand it's your own mind that you need to train. Because sometimes what we do is we go out into the world and we want to change everybody else. Right? But that doesn't work, because there's 8 billion people in this world. You can't convince 8 billion people to do things your way. It's just not possible. So as long as your mind is craving that permanence, then you will experience the struggles and difficulties of discontentedness. If you want everyone to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to you, it'd be wonderful if that was the case, but we live in an impermanent world. Some people are going to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, and some people aren't. That person who's being disrespectful, they're not causing you to be angry. What's causing you to be angry is your craving, your desire, you're wanting everybody to be permanently respectful to you. And you're just not going to experience that because you live in an impermanent world. So as long as you're craving permanence, when you get what you want, you'll get happy. But when you don't get what you want, you're going to get angry and frustrated. So you can train your mind to let these things go. And now you can experience the peace and the joy in all situations. It doesn't mean you're still going to maybe be friends with this person who's utterly disrespectful, but your mind can be protected where you're not experiencing discontentedness. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular topic of the Four Noble Truths, establishing right view. Yes.
Okay. How do you find the balance when you are in a situation where, I don't know, you're having some issues and either you need to decide if you're going to let that go or continue the effort? Like, I remember you mentioned a few talks ago that you have been married for, I don't know, 17 years, and your wife and you have only like truly be happy for 11 years. I don't remember like the exact amount of years that you mentioned, but I do remember that phrase. So yeah, I mean, I can imagine in your path to enlightenment, you need to let certain things go or to continue the effort to, I don't know, solve things, to make it better, to work on it. So yeah, like how did you decide like the balance between letting go or continue?
Yeah, so the ability to let go doesn't mean that you end a relationship. This is a big misunderstanding that some people have, that letting go doesn't mean you walk away from a relationship. It means that you don't try to control this person or force this person to be a certain way. So what you're doing is you're training your mind to let go of the craving, desire, attachment. It doesn't mean that you're letting go of the relationship itself. I'll give you this example so you guys can see that it's not the object that is the problem. The thing that the Buddha is describing here is what's going on inside the mind. So if I had a bottle of water, like a liter of water, and I was going on this hike, and I have this liter of water in my car, and now I pull up to this trailhead, and I'm going on this hike, and I'm 30 or 45 minutes down the trail, and I realize, I forgot my water. Oh my goodness, I forgot my water. And I'm going to be out here for 6 hours. I got to go get my water. And I hurry up back to the car. Maybe I twist my ankle along the way. I sling open the door and I get my water. Water. Right? In this case, the mind is highly discontent because I'm craving, I'm longing, I'm yearning, I'm really wanting that water to be permanent. Because I could also have been out on the trail and I could be 30 or 45 minutes down the trail and I could be like, I forgot the water. Well, I'm going to be out here for about 6 or 8 hours. I better turn around and go get that water, right? Now you just calmly make your way back to the car. You open the door. You didn't twist your ankle. It's like, sweet, I got my water. Let's go on this hike, right? You can maintain your calmness and composure. So it's not that you have to get rid of the water or you have to get rid of the relationship. You've got to get rid of that longing, yearning for it, where you're craving for it to be permanent. So what I had to get rid of in the relationship with my wife is trying to control her because I wanted her to be a certain way. And I'll give you an example of this, just a small one. That when I grew up, our family, the way it worked, back then, before smartphones, is that if we were children and we wanted to go outside the house, we had to leave a note for my mom. We had to tell her, like, I'm at Jay's house playing Nintendo. I'll be home at 6 p.m., right? And my mom came home from work. She would see the note on the table and she would know, like, okay, her son's over here and he's going to be coming back at this particular time. And this is something I grew up with. Well, when I met with my wife and we started living together, sometimes I would come home and she wasn't there. And I would be discontent. And I would tell her, before you leave, you got to leave me a note. You got to put a note and tell me where you're going so I know where you're going, right? And I know when you're going to be back. And I was worried when she wasn't there. This was my mind craving permanence because it had been conditioned as a child to believe that this is the way that you needed to function, that I was craving that permanence, to always know where she was at. Well, she did that like once or twice, and then she wisely like stopped doing it. And then I just had to let it go. And I realized like, I can't control this person. I can't force her to do what I want her to do. So in that situation, I had to let go of wanting her to be a certain way. And now she goes around all over the place and I have no idea where she is in any given day. But I know she's out there having a good time and she's making wise decisions and she's living her life, and that's wonderful, right? So you don't have to let go of the relationship. You have to let go of the longing, yearning for it to be a certain way. Whether you end a certain relationship or not, because in some cases you are going to need to walk away from a relationship, this is a decision that you need to make on a personal basis. On your own situation, you need to look at the relationship and decide, is there any possibility of improving this relationship and getting to a better place? Or is there no opportunity for that? The criteria that's going to make it so that you guys can improve your relationship is both people need to be willing to do work, and they need to be willing to do the work to realize that the problem isn't each other, that the problem is within your own mind. So me and my wife, we had problems for 11 years, but then for the last 5 years, everything has been completely perfect. But at that 11-year mark, we both understood the problems that we were experiencing wasn't each other. The problem was within our own mind. So once we accepted responsibility for the problems within our own mind, then we were able to eliminate those cravings, desires, attachments, and get to the peace and the joy. If I was willing to do the work and she wasn't, or if she was willing to do the work and I wasn't, it wouldn't have actually worked out. But because she did work, I did work, we accepted our own responsibility, and individually we did work, and we supported and encouraged each other along the way, that's why we were able to get to a peaceful relationship. But if either one of us weren't interested in that, it wouldn't have worked out. So if you have some relationships that are problematic, if you're willing to do the work, great, because you're going to need to do that regardless, no matter who you're in a relationship with. But if the other person isn't willing to do the work to realize that they are imperfect and they are struggling and having difficulties, maybe they keep blaming you for the problems that they're experiencing, this relationship won't ever get fixed because they're going to continue to blame you for all the problems that they're having. So that's them having wrong view. But you're still going to need to get to the peace and joy, whether it's with this person or somebody else. So as long as you're willing to do the work, then you'll be able to find somebody at some point that is also willing to do the work on their own mind. So you're really not working on the relationship itself. Me and my wife did get to a peaceful place with our relationship, but we accomplished that through getting to a peaceful place for ourselves individually. We didn't actually have to work on the relationship itself. We actually had to work on our own mind. I had to learn how to communicate better. I had to learn how to stop putting expectations on her and controlling her. It was all the work I had to do internally. And once I did that, then the relationship fixed itself. So you'll have to look at those things and decide for yourself, is this person willing to do the work? Because you know that you are, because you've been here for a few weeks now learning. So if this other person's willing to do the work, you guys can sort it out. But if they're not willing to do the work, you won't be able to sort out that issue.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. And I have another question about the self. Can I ask you?
Yeah,
okay.
You can ask whatever you like.
So there is no self, but like, can the self be or exist like spontaneously? Like, for example, I'm not a killer, but I don't know. Right now, I have a knife and I kill the girl right next to me. So that doesn't make me a killer for the rest of my life, right? But that made me maybe a killer while I was doing it. So I don't know. I mean, if things happened, because everything is like impermanent, but they do happen. So can someone be like have a self just like, I don't know, for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, like, I don't know, I could say I'm a contortionist because I practice contortion, but maybe I am only that while I'm doing it. Then if I'm not able to do it, I won't be a contortionist anymore, but I am while I am doing it. So the self can be something just when we are like in the pure action.
No, there is no self, but this is the problem, is that the mind's going to keep trying to grab onto it as if it is a self. So you can understand that you are doing the activity that people describe as contortionism, but that doesn't define who you are as a person. So now when you're doing it, you can do it and enjoy it, but at some point, you're probably not going to be doing that anymore. Or we definitely know that you're not going to be doing that, because at some point, even if you do it up until you die, you're not going to be doing it anymore. So as long as you grab onto it as who you are, then when somebody says something positive about contortionist, then you'll feel pleasant feelings. And when they say something negative or degrading, you're going to feel sad or frustrated. So this elimination of the self and thinking that there is a self, realizing non-self, is to get to the point where you're not clinging to any of this stuff as who you are. So the mind's going to keep trying to grasp and hold on to something and say, this is who I am, but it doesn't define who you are just because you're doing that activity.
Okay, so this is just to stop being like offended if we hear something about ourselves because it's not ourselves. Right, but I mean, it does help to say like I am a teacher, you know, so people know what you do. Like I don't know.
It's a matter here. I'll help you. It's a matter of being able to say these things without the mind adopting the identity. So if somebody says, like, say I'm at a hospital and I'm filling out a form, and the nurse says, "Are you Buddhist?" Right? Usually I'll just say yes, right? But I don't even identify with I am a Buddhist, right? But it's just easier to say that in that situation because that person knows what that means. But my mind doesn't adopt that as who I am as a person. It doesn't adopt that label. So the Buddha, he wasn't a Buddhist, right? So you need to be able to learn how to use the language without actually adopting it as who you are as a person. And this is where you're shedding the thought that there is a self, and this is part of realizing non-self, which we're going to talk about when we get to that class. I'm going to show you how disassociating with this body or this mind is who you are through the vocabulary that you use will help you to actually realize non-self. So you will need to say sometimes like, I am a teacher, or I am this, or I am that, but your mind needs to be able to disassociate with that as who you are as a person and not cling to it as your identity.
Okay, and could you claim credit for having reached a state of consciousness where you don't feel discontented anymore because, you decide to follow the Eightfold Path?
Can you claim, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Wait, I brought it. Let me see.
You mean me personally, or like as a teaching for a student? Would it be wise to claim that you've attained a certain level of consciousness?
Yeah, because you say that an enlightened person doesn't doesn't claim credit for himself.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's a little bit difficult to understand like how everything is connected, how nothing is independent, but we do have free will and kind of like we are independent. It's like both things at the same time.
So that's not something that I teach. That's not something the Buddha teaches, that we're all connected. We are all individual beings making our own individual decisions. We all have our own free will. So that is something that you haven't heard from me or from the teachings of the Buddha, but you might have heard it somewhere else. But it's not something that would lead you to understanding that we're all individual beings making individual decisions. And now we're experiencing the results of those individual decisions. That's our karma, or the results of our decisions.
Okay, so in Buddhists, they don't say that nothing is independent, that we live in a connected world and something happened because of something happened and so on.
I'm sure there's someone somewhere that considers what they do to be that, and they consider that to be Buddhism, but you'll never see anywhere that the Buddha teaches that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question around hope and like the concept of like a leap of faith. And I don't think it matters what the situation is, but in either situation, I'm hopeful for some sort of positive experience. I want to have realistic expectations, knowing that I can't control the outcomes. But it kind of sounds like I shouldn't have hope.
Okay.
Because that's a desire. That's a craving.
Yeah. So what you'll find the more you dive into these teachings is the language that we've been using throughout our life doesn't really accurately reflect what you need to be thinking and processing in the world around you in order to be able to get to this mental state. So we're taught, for example, like pride is good, to be proud of yourself, but that's actually conceits and arrogance. Or we've been talking about hope, like I hope this or I hope that. That's like a longing, yearning, like I hope to see you tomorrow. I don't hope to see you tomorrow. It'd be nice to see you tomorrow. I'm interested to see you tomorrow, and we'll have a great time if I see you tomorrow, but I don't have this hope. I don't have this longing, yearning for it. So you'll start to get more familiar with vocabulary and how we're using it, and realize that you can more accurately reflect what's going on within your own mind and how to interact in the world in a peaceful way without grabbing onto these words that we've been using before that really just have craving, desire, attachment embedded into them. So you can have a goal, objective, an interest. You can have this willingness to do something where you would like to pursue a certain goal or objective, but you don't have this longing, yearning for it. And that word hope oftentimes has like a little bit of longing, yearning in there. All right, so I think it's getting close to lunch and time for us to go out on our excursion. For those of you guys that would like to go on the excursion, so I think that's all the questions that we have. So what I'm going to do is break here. It's basically 1 o'clock. We're going to pick things up at 6:30. Originally, what I was thinking is that we could eat lunch around here and then head out for the excursion. But let me check in with you guys that are going on the excursion. Would you like to eat around here and then go out to the hot springs, or would you like to go out to the hot springs and eat out there? Because there's a restaurant actually at the hot springs. It'll take us about 45 minutes to get there. So let me see a show of hands. How many people would like to eat here in the local area? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many people would like to eat out there? Of course, impermanence, right? Not everyone's going to say the same thing, right? You're okay both ways? Okay. I'll tell you what, let's all meet at the tables out front. I'm going to see if the van is here and see what they need to do, because it might be better if we just jump in the van and just go. Maybe we can get some snacks along the way or something, and there's some snacks over there. So I'll meet you guys out at the tables. Thank you guys for your questions, and we'll see you guys either at the excursion or this evening at our 6:30 class.